Welcome, curious minds, to the deep dive. Today, we're diving into something huge. We are going to try and link the really intense internal philosophical struggle of a single creator with the sprawling radical architecture of an entire functioning society.
It's an incredible stack of sources we've got. It's this combination of deeply personal reflection documents from a creative catalyst we know as Tommy Elvkile, and then on the other hand, these extensive, highly detailed world-building notes for fictional civilization, I mean. It's called Manaheim.
And what's so fascinating, what really pulls you in, is that it feels less like reading two different things and more like you're decoding the same philosophical core expressed in two totally different ways. One individual, one collective.
Exactly. The individual and the collective.
That's the central tension we're exploring. For most of us, right? Uncertainty and chaos are things we try to get rid of. They're bugs in the system.
They're problems to be solved.
Right. But these sources, they argue the exact opposite. Both Tommy in his own artistic journey and Manaheim, this civilization of 4 million people, they treat uncertainty, disorder, and that chaotic pursuit of knowledge not as problems, but as the fundamental operating system, the necessary starting point for everything.
Chaos is the raw material.
Yeah.
You can't build or innovate without it.
Right.
And the ultimate motto that drives this entire society, Manaheim, is to understand, is to become. And that's basically the grand societal version of Tommy's much more personal internal philosophy.
Brilliant.
Embrace the uncertainty.
The macro mirrors the micro. It's perfect.
It is.
So our mission today is to pull out the most potent insights from these documents. We're talking creative resilience, knowledge-based meritocracy, and why sometimes the biggest mess is exactly where the most surprising and robust structure is born. We want to give you some specific tools, some deep insights into how to handle the unknown.
Whether you're building a creative project or just, trying to navigate a complex job.
Exactly. Get ready for some pretty profound aha moments. So let's start at the source. Let's start with Tommy Elvkile, the imaginative spark himself. The documents give us this really great snapshot of his early days around 2024, and they describe him as the imaginative tinkerer.
Right. He was this pure, raw wellspring of creativity, the idea factory, they call him. But he was struggling with that classic creative problem.
Oh, I know this one. Starting 1,000 projects.
And finishing about 3. Yeah.
Yeah.
He was living entirely in the sketchbook margins, half-finished concepts everywhere.
That struggle is so relatable for anyone who's ever tried to make anything. That raw energy was, it was untamed. It was almost overwhelming itself.
But what's key, and this is what you have to grasp to understand his whole development, is where this need for structured creativity first showed up. It wasn't in some grand project. It was in a game he invented as a kid, called Uno card hockey.
And this anecdote, it's just a perfect microcosm of his mind. I mean, he wasn't using official toys or anything.
No, not at all. He was playing with whatever was around. Playing cards, like a 4 of elves, or even just regular Uno cards. Those were his action figures.
Marbles were the puck. And get this, Beanie Babies lined up as the boards and the nets. The whole setup was pure improvisation. Just whatever works.
But the structure underneath that improvisation was pure engineering. He meticulously, and I mean meticulously, he kept detailed loose-leaf roster sheets and stats, goals, rankings for over 200 distinct characters across 10 different teams. This was not casual play. This is a whole simulated league.
It just shows that even in that purest spark of his creativity, the drive wasn't just to play the game. It was to catalog the results, to organize the mess. He was building a system.
He was imposing rules, hierarchy, and a system of perpetual comparison, the stats, onto fundamentally random elements. The card draws, the way the marble rolls, that desire to build a complex, engineered ecosystem of thought. It was there from the very beginning.
It's incredible. The source even mentions this early concept of intellectual property. He was a kid trying to avoid copyright by, slightly tweaking the last names of real players?
Yeah, which just shows this early awareness of the rules that govern systems. But that raw spark, it needed guidance. And the sources show this dramatic shift in 2025. He transforms from what they call a soft bloom, the imaginative but hesitant cosmic apprentice, into the bold cartographer.
So what fueled that jump? Because that's the part that really applies to anyone who's feeling stuck, in that creative inertia.
The documents point directly to something called the Snowflake soundtrack. It was a musical journal. And this wasn't just a diary where he wrote down feelings. It was a system he forced on himself to articulate his longings, his shadows, his strength through music.
So he had to give form to these abstract feelings.
He had to. It forced him into this deep, necessary self-reflection that was both structured, he had to make a song, and deeply personal. He wasn't just creating things anymore. He was creating sense out of his own inner life.
And you can really hear that in the emotional risks he started taking. The source mentions songs like Under a Rock, which is all about feeling out of time and misplaced, or The Fun House, which just embraces these chaotic, repeating loops. It shows this newfound willingness to show his messiness, to put it out there.
And the really significant change is precisely that. He stopped fearing imperfection. He consciously, actively embraced the joy in the process over the final product.
That's a huge shift in mindset.
It's everything. He began archiving his thoughts, articulating his visions. He started treating his ideas not as these fragile, perfect things, but as ongoing documentation. He wasn't just thinking in metaphors anymore. He was translating those metaphors into something real, into action.
So he matured into a creator who, I guess, built a legacy through the courage to just consistently be himself. Even when that self was messy or awkward, he started inviting other people into these worlds he used to keep totally secret.
And that whole evolution defines his core identity now, what the sources call the creative catalyst. It's this fusion of wild imagination, sensitive introspection, and a really playful defiance.
Let's break down the components of that identity. The sources are pretty clear on this. First, he's the imaginative architect.
Right. And his inner world isn't some disorganized mess. It is, and this is a direct quote, an engineered ecosystem of thought. The mind maps he creates, they spiral in kaleidoscope, often in 3 dimensions.
Why 3 dimension?
Because he sees complexity and abstraction not as confusion, but as necessary dimension. It adds depth. It adds reality to the idea.
That's a really wonderful distinction. So complexity isn't a barrier for him. It's a feature. The structure he builds, it isn't there to constrain his imagination. It's there to allow it to build something truly complex.
Exactly. But it's not a rigid academic structure, which brings us to the second part of his identity. He's also the agent of controlled chaos.
I like the sound of that.
It's a great phrase. He thrives on momentum and magic, but he channels the chaos. He organizes the mess into poetry, into songs, into functional systems. It's like, imagine a storm that builds a lighthouse right in the eye of itself.
So he's harnessing the unpredictable without, sanitizing it. He organizes the mess. He doesn't eliminate it. The source material calls this organized mess.
And Delisely. And finally, beneath all the quirkiness in the systems, he's the meaning seeker. He's deeply existential. His imagination works like a mirror for his own self-discovery.
Is there an example of that?
Yeah, the track Playing God. It apparently reflects the profound isolation a creator can feel from their own creation. It forces him to explore that distance, that existential gap between the maker and the made.
Its creation is self-therapy.
Yeah.
And self-discovery.
And all of this, all 3 parts of that identity, leads us to this one analogy that just perfectly encapsulates his role. The line cook in the Inner Life's restaurant.
I love that. The dreamer with a spatula. It takes this incredibly abstract concept of a creative catalyst and it grounds it. It makes it tangible, high pressure. So if the chef is the big visionary, what's the line cook's job?
It's execution.
And the
Moment under pressure. It demands agility, speed, and, most importantly, a deep trust in the process when everything is happening at once. The line cook isn't the one designing the high-concept menu.
Right. They're the ones translating that high-concept idea into actual experiential art. They have to deal with the heat, the timing, the potential for everything to go wrong right now.
So he thrives in that sizzling, lived-in immediacy of creation. He's assembling the raw ingredients of the inner world, the thoughts, the feelings, the half-formed fears, and turning them into tangible forms. Music, metaphor, a song.
And the focus is on connection, not applause. That's a profound distinction. A chef worries about the critics. A line cook worries about getting the plate out while the food is hot and perfect.
That's the practical power of the analogy. It reminds you that just coming up with an idea is maybe 10% of the work.
If that...
Right. Translating it into reality, that requires a completely different skill set. One that embraces the pressure and the unpredictability of the moment. You have to trust your instinct, your muscle memory, because you just don't have time to second-guess the process. Tommy is the action hero of his inner world. He forces concepts into reality.
And the sources really emphasize that trust. It's the ability to see a concept, recognize the raw ingredients, the mess, and just trust that the system you've built, the process, will make it, well, edible.
It's the perfect bridge to his core philosophy.
Which is where this all gets really practical for all of us.
That intense focus on execution and embracing the mess, that is the foundation of his philosophy. Embrace the uncertainty. And this is the abstract blueprint that we are about to see fully realized in the structure of Manaheim.
This is such a big idea because for most of us, uncertainty is the enemy. It's the enemy of productivity. It causes procrastination, anxiety. It just halts progress.
But here, the sources define it completely differently. They call it the secret sauce and the grit that makes the pearl. It's a master disruptor that forces creators off the beaten path.
Where, as the document says, the real magic happens.
Reframing the unknown is the entire game. And the source material details how voluntarily engaging with that discomfort, it functions as a kind of high-level resilience training.
It's a mental analog to physical training, right? Think about the psychological discomfort of starting a huge, complex project. Or even just giving a presentation when you haven't memorized every single line.
Right. You're training your system. You're teaching it to realize that just because something feels uncomfortable or volatile, it doesn't mean it's actually dangerous. You build this psychological muscle memory for adaptability.
And that trained resilience, it feeds directly into the next benefit. Novelty sparks creativity. Truly brilliant ideas, they rarely, if ever, emerge from a comfortable routine.
Uncertainty acts as campfire fuel, is how they put it. It forces new and strange mixtures. If you're always using the same 3 ingredients, you're only ever going to make the same 3 recipes. You need that jolt to shake things up.
That jolt just breaks up your cognitive framework. And the long-term application of doing this over and over, it leads to a genuine freedom from dread.
How so?
Well, by tackling small uncertainties head-on, say, picking up a skill you know nothing about, you clear up all this mental clutter, you realize you can handle curveballs.
The long-term payoff there is huge. By expanding your emotional and intellectual option pool, as they call it, you reduce your baseline anxiety. You have actual empirical proof that the worst-case scenario is survivable.
And often the detour leads to a better destination anyway.
Exactly. And on a measurable physical level, this practice is literally rewiring your brain through neuroplasticity. The source mentions that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's about having built a well-worn trail through the dark.
I love that image. So every time you push past fear, you build a stronger neural pathway for future bravery. It makes the next push easier. You are literally making a habit of courage.
This brings us to some really profound concepts that underpin this whole philosophy. First, there's entropy as a creative force. This is a concept taken straight from physics and applied to creativity.
So disorder and messiness are actually necessary for change, for growth, for evolution?
Yes, the quote here is exceptional. Uncertainty is not the enemy of stability. It's the womb of invention.
Wow! That just flips the conventional business model completely on its head. If everything were perfectly predictable, static, and ordered, nothing new could ever emerge.
Nothing. You need the chaotic shakeup. The random collision of different ideas or the forced breakdown of an old system. That's where true radical innovation happens. We spend so much time trying to manage entropy out of existence, but Tommy's philosophy says we should court it, invite it in.
And that's tied so intrinsically to the next big concept, the shadow option. This is where the philosophy gets really existential, really personal.
The shadow option is. It's the potential, bolder, often uncomfortable version of yourself that remains hidden every single time you choose the safe, predictable path.
So every uncomfortable choice is described as a doorway to a cooler self.
It's such a powerful internal challenge. It means that avoiding discomfort isn't a neutral act. It's you, actively closing a door on self-discovery and potential growth.
We're constantly making these micro-decisions, and each one determines which version of ourselves, the safe one or the daring one, gets to manifest, gets to step into the light.
And if you keep choosing comfort, you are actively cultivating a future self you won't recognize, or maybe even respect.
That puts the highest possible stakes on a simple, creative decision. If you choose not to write that risky song or apply for that challenging job, you haven't just missed an opportunity.
You've intentionally blocked the growth of a better version of you.
It's heavy stuff.
It is. But this abstract philosophy, it needs practical hooks. So the sources provide this really clear manifesto of guiding beliefs. It's essentially a cheat sheet for you, for the listener.
Okay, let's go through them. Number 1, curiosity is greater than certainty. You approach the unknown not as a threat, but with wonder. The potential discovery outweighs the security of knowing what happens next.
Number 2, discomfort is a compass. If you feel that familiar internal tension, that fear about starting something, You are likely moving in the right direction. You're moving out of the cozy, predictable trap of the comfort zone.
3. Control is an illusion. Intention is power. This is a big one. Stop trying to micromanage outcomes, which is impossible anyway. Focus entirely on what you can influence, your effort, your attitude, the quality of your process.
4. Do it scared, but do it anyway. Courage is not a feeling. It is action in the presence of fear.
Yeah.
And 5. Beauty can be found in the unfinished. We have to let go of the paralysis that perfectionism causes. Documentation and iteration are more valuable than some mythical perfect final product.
6. Even the wrong turn teaches you the map. Every mistake is just data. It's information you didn't have before. The road you don't take often defines the road you realize you must take.
And number 7, which I think is brilliantly wraps it all up. Every step into the fog expands the path behind you. The path doesn't exist until you walk it. The moment you take a step, you have created history and you've proven possibility.
And speaking of those mistakes, the philosophy completely redefines what failure is through this concept of creative compost.
Right. Failures, blunders, awkward moments, they are not wasted effort. They are the nutrients. They are the rich fertilizer that feeds all your future successes.
Your worst ideas might become the soil your best ones grow in. It's a fundamental change in perspective. If a project fails spectacularly, you haven't lost time. You've generated a huge amount of raw material compost that ensures the next thing you build is on a richer foundation.
You've learned what doesn't work, which is invaluable.
Exactly. And to make this whole process more engaging, the philosophy suggests gamifying life, approaching life as a roguelike video game.
Explain that for people who might not know.
So in a roguelike game, you move through challenges, and every time you die or fail, you don't just lose. You gain experience, or XP, that makes your next run, your next attempt, easier. You're stronger. The unpredictable journey becomes more exciting and less terrifying because failure is part of the game design.
It's a complete shift in your internal dialogue. You stop seeing yourself as a victim of circumstance, and you start seeing yourself as the protagonist, learning the mechanics of a complex, beautiful, and sometimes brutally difficult game.
And this whole philosophy, embracing volatility, perpetual experimentation, it is the perfect framework for understanding Manaheim.
Because if this is how a single creative mind operates, what happens when an entire society of 4 million people decides to adopt that exact same principle?
So now we're moving. From the microscale of Tommy's personal philosophy to the macroscale of Manaheim, the civilization where that motto, to understand is to become, dictates every single aspect of life. Manaheim is this fictional city, this massive experimental center, completely defined by intellectual innovation and dynamism.
And to really get it, we have to anchor the society with its origin story. It started 300 years ago as a place called Port Royal, a simple trade and fishing hub under the thumb of the strict religious kingdom of Castleguard.
So traditional, rigid, structured.
Very. But then the discovery of mana energy sparked a mana rush, and that caused massive, rapid economic and social disparities. It was chaos.
The defining moment, though, the real crisis, was the God Wars. This huge holy war fueled by faith and power grabs in the regions all around them. Port Royal became a reluctant supplier for the kingdom.
And then the enemy, the Dorconans, they launched this devastating 40-day bombardment. And Castleguard, their own kingdom, completely abandoned them. They just left Port Royal to die, focusing instead on reclaiming some faraway holy landmark.
That abandonment, that was the birth of Manaheim?
It was. They were left to fend for themselves. No outside help, no established gods coming to their rescue. And they realized their salvation wasn't in rigid faith or inherited hierarchy. It was in immediate, practical, applied knowledge, their own ingenuity.
And that reliance on innovation led directly to their Declaration of Independence and the birth of Manaheim, a society built solely on the intellect.
So what does a civilization built on intellectual dynamism actually look like? Well, the climate itself dictates the form. It's wet, subtropical, constant humidity, sudden warm rainstorms. Visually, the source is painted as Venice meets Cambridge in a swamp.
Which is an amazing image.
It really is. The architecture is a marvel of necessary ingenuity. You see these elevated wooden walkways, sleek tech parks, sprawling research halls, all connected by boardwalks and raised paths that just wind through dense cypress trees and shimmering water lilies.
They're using advanced magic tech for essential systems, right? Like humidity control, filtration, illumination.
And the structures themselves include these huge, amazing glass domes and sunken courtyards that are all designed to manage the perpetual dampness. They're built with the environment, not against it.
This ecosystem integration is so crucial. The environment isn't just a backdrop for them, it's an active, living laboratory.
Absolutely. They study these semi-visible, possibly sentient marsh spirits, and they use these highly volatile but very valuable mirror toads in alchemy, which, if you agitate them, are highly toxic.
So even their resources have this element of uncertainty built in.
Constantly. Other key biological elements are always being analyzed. Lanternflies, for example, they sync their glow with the swamp tides, so they provide a natural clock and a warning system. Quill bulbs emit natural light for energy-efficient illumination. And glowcap fungi are harvested for bioluminescent mapping, helping scholars navigate the darkest marshlands or for creating complex magical potions.
And this deep integration, it informs their entire culture, right down to the dinner table. Their food is designed to be nutrient-dense and functional.
They eat marsh grain risotto, which is made with local swamp grains and smoked toad fat.
Wait, hold on, I have to pause there. Marsh grain risotto with smoked toad fat. That one detail is so telling. It highlights their entire philosophy in action. They're using these volatile, unpredictable elements, the toads, and highly localized materials, the marsh grain. And through understanding an applied process, smoking and cooking, they're making them essential, stable parts of their daily lives.
They have literally embraced the uncertainty of their food source.
They literally have, what else? They have quill bulb stew, which is bioluminescent. The entire soup glows faintly.
The flavors reflect the environment. Earthy, herbal, strong umami notes, a controlled, tangy bitterness, often infused with mana-based magic for, say, mood elevation or enhanced focus.
And the clothing is just as practical. Waterproof sandals, lightweight tunics, and color-shifting cloaks for scholars to blend into the visually complex swamp during their research. Their high-research ritual robes have glowing embroidery and often include enchanted visors to filter mana energy.
Now we get to the core mechanic of Manaheim, the social structure. If your motto is to understand is to become, then value is based purely on ideas, innovation, and knowledge, not on inherited wealth or birth.
And this creates an intense meritocracy of the mind. The sources lay out 4 main classes.
At the very top, you have the enlightened orders. This is the intellectual elite, the top researchers, the mages, the inventors. Their influence and their power comes entirely from their published work and their major verifiable discoveries. They're the intellectual nobility.
Below them, the spiral-born. These are your apprentices, your journeyman scholars. They collaborate intensely in groups they call thought clusters, constantly working on complex problems, contributing to the body of knowledge.
Then you have the untethered. These are the laborers, the maintenance crews, the resource harvesters. They are respected for their essential practical skills, but they exist separate from that core intellectual mission. They keep the lights on and the walkways safe.
And finally, this fascinating group, the obscured. Rogue inventors, esoteric cults, or maybe scholars who failed the rigorous trials. They live on the fringes. Sometimes they're feared for their instability, other times they're respected for their highly unconventional or forbidden ideas. They are the system's voluntary or involuntary rejects.
That structure presents a massive tension point, which the sources don't ignore at all. If value is purely intellectual, how do you stop the untethered, the people farming the marsh grain and maintaining those glass domes, from just becoming second-class citizens?
That's the challenge of a true meritocracy, isn't it?
It is. And while the untethered aren't part of the enlightened orders, the whole system relies entirely on their output. Their respect comes from their efficiency, their deep practical understanding of the ecosystem. However, social mobility requires passing these incredibly intense trials of cognition, curiosity, and community debate.
Those trials sound brutal. So if you're an untethered person and you invent a new water filtration system, you can move up, but you still have to defend your discovery academically.
Precisely. You have to prove the why just as much as you prove the what. And failure has a significant social consequence. The dim-born stigma. It means you lack the required intellectual fire. And that social mark can be crippling in a society where your reputation is basically currency.
This intense focus just permeates every part of life, including family. Families aren't just bloodlines. They're knowledge clusters focused on specific fields. So you'd have, like, the alchemical families of the Ninth Marsh, or the glass illusion theory family.
And children might even move between these clusters based on their talent, not their biological ties. The mentor bonds are actually considered stronger than simple parenting. There's a formal mind-worn ceremony that creates this powerful mentor-protege link, and that's considered more significant than being a biological parent, because the bond is based on a shared intellectual lineage and purpose.
And the most unique custom here, the one that really reflects that ultimate goal of to understand is to become. is ritual reclaiming. Explain this in detail because it's wild.
Ritual reclaiming is how Manaheim handles legacy. So imagine a student named Alchemical Mindworn. If they make a truly groundbreaking discovery, say, they cure the marsh miasma, they don't just get a medal. They are allowed to add a symbol or a term reflecting that discovery to their own lineage name.
So their new name might become Alchemical Miasma Cure Mindworn.
Exactly. They are literally rewriting their own ancestry, not with blood or wealth, but in intellectual ink. They are retroactively making themselves the ancestor of their own knowledge. It is an incredibly powerful incentive.
It creates this state of perpetual dynamism. The past is always open to intellectual revision based on what you achieve in the present.
And their customs reflect this intensity. The rite of confounding requires 12-year-olds to present a genuinely challenging question to senior scholars, and they're judged on the depth and the daring of the question, not the answer.
That's amazing. It teaches them that intellectual rigor begins not with knowing, but with correctly questioning.
And then you have mirror days, a mandatory exercise in empathy. Everyone spends a day mirroring a stranger's life. It's a forced perspective shift to remind everyone that there are multiple truths and that the untethered perspective is just as real as the enlightened one. It's their societal check against intellectual arrogance.
And when disputes arise,
They're settled by debate duels, highly theatrical thought duels judged by peers to make sure logic and precedent prevail. It's not about who argues the loudest. It's about who defends their thesis most soundly. The entire society functions like one giant university debate hall.
which naturally leads us to governance. How does a society obsessed with perpetual discourse actually govern itself?
The government is a body called the Evermoot, and it's run by ongoing discourse and merit. There's a rotating council that's elected every 6 years through merit contests.
And these are not elections with campaign speeches. These are public thesis trials. Candidates have to demonstrate logic, inventiveness, wisdom, often by solving a major societal problem right there in front of an audience, judged by a panel of their peers.
The whole system is designed for high turnover and constant cycling of expertise. But continuity is maintained by the archivist triad, 3 long-term figures chosen by the previous triad who served 20-year terms. They're essentially the guardians of institutional memory and historical precedent. They're the stabilizing factor against radical intellectual swings.
And what happens when the political structure is broken down into competing schools of thought instead of traditional political parties?
You get the glass-bound rationalists who are focused on tech and verifiable data, the Marsh spiral mystics focused on ecological integration and intuition, the reading circle radicals who use paradox and illusion in governance, and the empirical pact centrists who are all about highly proven incremental solutions.
These groups don't run attack ads. They publish competing academic papers, they hold massive public debates, and occasionally they stage intellectual strikes.
Which means they withhold specific magical innovations or critical research until their ideas are taken seriously by the Evermoot. Imagine a major tech company refusing to release a new operating system until a specific law is passed. That's the level of influence that knowledge holds in Mannheim.
Let's pivot to law enforcement, because in a society ruled by reason, law has to be philosophical, not punitive.
Exactly. The Axiom Wardens are the peacekeepers. They are logic-bound and trained in ethics, advanced interrogation, and low-impact binding magic.
And the legendary detail here is that their robes supposedly glow faintly if someone lies, which focuses the enforcement entirely on truth and reason, not brute force. They're essentially ethical philosophers who have been given the authority to enforce stability.
So when it comes to crime, minor offenses are settled in public adjudicator debates. The accused defends themselves with theory, logic, and precedent. They often argue the philosophical implications of their actions and whether they truly broke the social contract defined by knowledge.
The goal is finding truth and rehabilitation through understanding, not just punishment.
It's a society where a good lawyer is a brilliant philosopher. Imagine being judged by how well you can argue the logical necessity of your action rather than by a jury of your peers. It places an immense value on self-awareness and accountability to reason.
Okay, let's talk about the engine that keeps all of this running, the economy. If value is based on understanding, then intellectual output has to be the product.
It's centered on that, on alchemical refinement and specialized manatech. Their exports aren't just goods. They export arcane instruments, sophisticated research papers, philosophical writs, patented spells, and licenses to tutor in proprietary methods. Your groundbreaking idea is your primary product.
And the currency system reflects this complexity. It's a hybrid system.
Right. They use talk marks, which are these enchanted crystal discs whose value is tied to the phase of the moon when they were made, making them incredibly difficult to counterfeit,
But the real currency of power and prestige are tithes.
which function as a reputation currency. These are publicly logged credits you get for intellectual contributions. A published paper, a successful apprenticeship, a verified scientific breakthrough. You spend tithes on favors, on access to high-level research, or on funding your own projects.
This is both fascinating and terrifying because losing tithes is socially disastrous. This isn't just about money. This is like having your entire professional and social life determined by your real-time academic reputation constantly logged on a public ledger.
It ensures that every single citizen is under perpetual pressure to contribute knowledge.
It's the ultimate expression of to understand is to become. Your social standing, your ability to progress, your family's legacy, it is all entirely dependent on your intellectual dynamism. If you stop learning and contributing, you socially dissolve.
Their what about belief? Unsurprisingly, their system is non-dogmatic and intellectual. Deities aren't figures of blind faith, they're powerful metaphors and guiding principles.
For example,
Tyreek the Weaver represents complexity and interconnected systems. Azaleen of the Still Marsh represents patient observation and deep study. They debate metaphysics and cosmological theories like other cultures debate laws.
and their rituals blur science and spirituality. Fog fasting involves sensory deprivation in vapor chambers designed to induce new ideas and clear the mind. Glimmer drowning is immersion in glowing waters to get visions and alignment.
And group chanting isn't religious. It's used to align thought frequencies before a major complex experiment, ensuring maximum cognitive collaboration. Their festivals are intellectual endeavors too. The equinox of inquiry is 24 hours of non-stop structured debate, and the lantern light parlay involves floating anonymous questions down the canals, encouraging challenging thought without fear of social consequence.
Finally, we have to look at how a society focused entirely on knowledge defends itself. Their strategy is adaptive innovation, and their guiding principle is conflict as a riddle, not a race.
Which means their defense is overwhelmingly non-lethal. It's focused on denial and containment.
Their fortifications are incredible applications of manatech. They have thoughtword canals moats with magic sensors that detect and analyze hostile intent. It's a psychological defense layer.
And the glass spine, a network of towers that casts illusions, deploys sleep fog, and creates rift domes that can bend light, sound, and even memory around key research sites. Even their intelligent moss walls confuse attackers by actively rerouting paths and disrupting navigation. The physical city fights back psychologically.
And they have no standing army.
None. Their specialized units are few but powerful. The Custodians of Paradox are elite mage strategists who work in triads, focusing on counterintuitive solutions. And the secretive Mirror Watch focuses entirely on info warfare, psychic defense, and profiling the enemy's cognitive weaknesses.
Their tactics revolve around blind them before you strike. Information denial, illusion, confusion. But the core strategy is understand the enemy to dissolve the conflict, using empathy and psychological profiling as tactical tools.
They aim to stabilize and contain chaos using quarantine zones or stasis fields rather than conquering territory. And this whole philosophical defense is internalized by every citizen through the doctrine of three walls.
What's that?
Every citizen in Manaheim is expected to maintain three defenses. One visible defense, like a basic shield spell, one secret defense, like hidden knowledge or an emergency spell, and one symbolic defense, their personal willpower and intellectual conviction.
It's a truly holistic philosophical approach to survival. Their defense is literally a reflection of their deep knowledge. They believe that if they understand the threat better than the threat understands itself, they will always prevail.
So when we synthesize all this, Tommy's personal philosophy of embracing uncertainty and Manaheim's radical societal structure, what stands out is how profoundly they redefine power, value, and stability. For Tommy, power is found in the willingness to create imperfectly and proceed without a map. It's internal resilience.
And for Manaheim, power is collective intellectual dynamism. Value, wealth, legacy, even defense. It's all based entirely on what you understand and how creatively and continuously you apply that knowledge. Tommy's intensely personal struggle to find structure in creative chaos is just perfectly mirrored by Manaheim's constant collective attempt to build a stable civilization on the perpetually shifting sands of intellectual dynamism.
The profound takeaway for you, the learner, is permission. Permission to embrace the volatile. Both the creative catalyst and the successful civilization confirm that the blueprint doesn't need to be complete before you begin. Uncertainty isn't a flaw in the system.
It is the necessary system, and that's precisely where true discovery, personal growth, and societal advancement live. When your family name can be ritually reclaimed based on your intellectual achievement, and when your government is selected entirely by thesis defense, the pursuit of knowledge isn't academic, it's survival. It is the fundamental act of self-creation and societal stability.
Which leads us with a final provocative question. Given that both the creative individual, Tommy, and the collective society, Manaheim, rely entirely on constant experimentation, on questioning, on self-revision to thrive, if a civilization's entire existence is one giant, ongoing, collective experiment in intelligence, constantly shedding old ideas and embracing new uncertainties, what fundamental defining truth might they eventually discover about the true nature of reality that the rest of us who crave certainty have completely missed?